Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Yale. This is their part number, 2123 is what it is. This is a long mortise cylinder is what it is, and here it is. It's a 2123, and that means that it's a special length mortise cylinder. This happens to be 2 1/8 inch, which is what the client's application called for. I admittedly do not know what they're using this for, other than, quite clearly an unusual door, most likely an unusual door thickness. You can have other reasons why you might need a long cylinder. Obviously an unusual door thickness that has, this is about 7/8 longer, maybe 1 inch longer than your standard cylinders. Maybe you have a storeroom lock where you have 1 3/4 inch thick door, and the lock is centered in that 1 3/4 inch thick door, but then you have 1 inch of paneling or stone or woodwork applied to the secured side of the opening. That's going to necessitate a longer cylinder, as well as other longer parts as well, potentially screws, spindles, depending on the swing of the door, whether it's reverse or whether it's an in-swing or an outswing, and depending on where that extra thickness is added, you might need a longer extended lip on your strike plate, an extended lip on the strike. You could also install a cylinder like this into something unusual, such as a bottom rail lock, like Adams Wright, sister company to Yale, manufactures bottom rail deadbolts that you might have an unusual thickness. Another sister company of Yale's would be Securitron. They might have an electric deadbolt that you're installing into the frame, and it's going to run into the door. It'll bolt into the door. Well, you might be installing that into a 3-inch, jam, a jam depth of 3 inch, and you're going to use a cylinder or whatever the jam depth might be. It could be a lot of reasons why you need a longer cylinder. And this just happens to be an example of that. So the 2123 here, this weighs 0.77 pound. It's all brass. I said it's 2 1/8. That's the dimension from the underside of the head to the back of the cam. That's how almost all mortise cylinders are measured. Not every manufacturer does it that way. Almost everyone does it that way. Underside of the head to the back of the cam. If you're dealing with best mortise cylinders, they measure the overall length of the brass or the body itself. This would be a 2-inch cylinder, according to Best. Just have to be mindful of how they do it. Not every cylinder is measured from the underside of the head to the back of the cam, but almost all. This has a standard Yale cam on it, which is the 2160 cam. That's a major tip-off that it's going into a mortise lock, or some hardware like an 8800 mortise lock. That takes the Yale cam. That's a real good tip-off as to what it's being used for. If there was a standard cam on there, I would think that it could be some unusual application where you require a standard cam, such as maybe a old mortise lock, like a mortise lock that's 100 years old. If it was an aluminum storefront type cam, an Adams Wright cam, I would think that's, again, a sister company to Yale. I would think that, could be a bottom rail deadbolt, an unusual thickness. There are 2 1/4 inch thick aluminum storefront doors that exist, especially here in Florida with hurricane code. So anyway, I'm as interested to know where this is being used as the next person. This includes a cylinder collar. Interestingly enough, they did not supply a wave washer with it, which I would have expected to be included. I would be almost tempted to say that a wave washer ought to be included. It doesn't indicate, or at least I don't believe it does in the catalog. If you need a wave washer, search our site for the term wave washer. You'll find it. Be sure to order them accordingly. So in this part number, we've got 2123. That's the cylinder. We've got 6-pin. That's because I specified this cylinder to come with a 6-pin length key blank. This is O-bitted, which means 0-bitted. There are no cuts on this key. All of the pins that are in here are what would be a 0 or O length pin. And the reason I specified that for the client is because I know they're going to immediately key this into their keying system. So rather than just have it send out the factory standard randomly keyed, specify it O-bitted, because you're going to key it anyway, And then you get 2 key blanks you can use. Okay, 2 genuine original key blanks. You know, what's that worth? $2? $5? Obitted Para. This is a Para, an EIR keyway, just the standard Yale keyway. There are images down below that show the profile of the keyway and the broaching in the cylinder plug for the EIR keyway, the standard Yale keyway. That's what's in here. 2 1/8, we talked about that length of the mortise cylinder. 2160, that's the cam. And then 630, this is what's called a scalp plate, a very thin piece of architectural metal that's covering the brass body. It's stamped Yale. It's 630, which means that it's stainless steel base material with a brushed finish is what that means. That's everything that's in the box, except let me give you the dimensions of this cylinder collar that are here, because you'll probably want to use a cylinder collar, meaning when you install your cylinder, you don't want the head of the cylinder exposed. You want the head of the cylinder to be retained inside of the collar. So should someone try to attack the head of the cylinder with a wrench, that's just going to spin. So that's what you want. So the overall, I'll give you 4 dimensions. Outside diameter, 1.482. 1.482. The ID, 1.188. 1.188. The thickness of the collar, 0.317.
My apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
You're listening. 0.317. 0.317 is the OD. Then the dimension from the top of the ring to the shoulder. So let's go over that again. Thickness, 0.317. 0.317. That height of the shoulder, 0.164. Let's do that again. Yeah, 0.161. 0.161 from the top of the collar down to the shoulder here. So 0.317 minus 0.161 will give you that thickness there. So now you can really start to determine. And if you're using a wave washer, I would allow about 100,000ths of an inch for that, would be my guess. Let's switch now to the screen view and let's take a closer look at the supporting information. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so here's the item that we are looking at. We have some images here that we'll go over now. That's the box. That's what's in the box. The cylinder itself, and then multiple images of the cylinder. This is where the set screw from the mortise lock case would fit into, so as to prevent turning that cylinder, or at least all but prevent it. Front of the cylinder, side of the cylinder. That is 1 5/32 of an inch diameter, 32 ultrafine threads per inch. That's the standard thread type for standard mortise cylinders like this. For jumbo mortise cylinders by Yale's sister company Corbin Russwin, they make 1.5 inch diameter. Mogul cylinders, I think, have the same thread type as well, 32 threads per inch. That's called ultrafine, and I figure it's called ultrafine because you're installing this onto something that's relatively thin to begin with. Okay, so it's not, you know, what you're threading this to is not super thick. It's just the case of a mortise lock. So having as many threads packed per inch is the idea. All right, so let's take another look here. That's the Yale cam on the back, the 2160. That's a up close of your Para keyway. The length of those pins are just that O or 0 bitted that's here. Let's look at another set of images here. That's the trim ring. Just another image of it, a side view of it. Small little chamfer out here. Small little chamfer on the backside, you can barely see it. And then your 2 factory original keys. and then a profile of the key. Thumb side up, thumb side down. Now there's also a cut sheet that we should look at as well. Okay, that cut sheet, we're doing a 2123, and here it is. It's the same as the standard 2153 cylinder in these common lengths. You know, 1 1/8, 1 1/4, sure, all day long. 6-pin, very common. This client needed 2 1/8, so we had to change the part number to 2123. And then you have all of these lengths as possibilities here. Also, it tells us with this here, with this funny little asterisk for the 2123, asterisk, additional length available, price on application. Okay. Now let's go to the next page. Talks about the keyways. We're doing the E1R. I had called it EIR earlier. E1R Para stock keyway. That's called the Simplex Keyway. If you'll note that word that's there, and what that specifically means is that this keyway does not participate in a multiplex system as seen here. Okay. A multiplex system have 8 available cylinder plugs that are governed by multi-section and then an all-section key blank. You can see, you could use your imagination and see why that might be advantageous if you had 2 really quick reasons. If you needed 6,000 change keys in a 6-pin environment, you're going to need to use more than one keyway, number one. Number two, you might be able to improve security by having this on the condo property and this on the exterior common area doors. Well, that's a bad explanation. Here we go. You could have a 4-story building, 1, 2, 3, 4. Use each of these keyways on those individual floors. Then the maintenance who handles floors 1 and 2 can walk around with this key blank and it'll pass 1 and 2. Likewise, 3 and 4. The owner can walk around with this blank and pass all 4 of them, or 8 for that matter as well. But the E1R does not participate in that multiplex, so you can't share or have it work in concert with other keyways to build larger systems. Nothing unusual about that. It's the standard keyway, is the bottom line. They could have easily made the GA the standard keyway, but for whatever reason, the E1R is. I do like the E1R as a standard keyway because it is highly paracentric. Para. The term is paracentric. And that term is used to describe something that cuts across the center line multiple times. That's the center line. That key blank crosses across, moves over and through and across the center line, making it highly paracentric. What is the advantage to you? Well, maybe nothing really at all, I suppose. But there is certainly an advantage, and that would be shown here. If you're going to try to get an instrument or a tool in here to pick that or to manipulate that, because it's paracentric, the amount of room that you have is certainly restricted. Study your keyways and you'll see that the shape changes. And the more paracentric the keyway, the less capable one would be of having room to manipulate that. And in fact, highly paracentric keyways are a part of, or a common feature of, high security cylinders. Okay, so that is part of our cut sheet, the keyway. Now, the last page talks about cams. My part number has a 2160 in it because I know that this client was using it for a standard Yale lock. I know that. And that was the tip-off. You know, if they needed the cam for some other application, such as we had mentioned earlier, the Adams Wright, the 1161L, okay, or the Cloverleaf style, Corbin Russwin, you know, old style mortise locks that are 100 plus years old. There's more than one cam required for Adams Rite locks, and this is another one. And there are actually three. I don't. This would possibly work for it. It's a shortened standard cam. That's a standard cam right here. They have Adams Rite has a lock. It's either their 2230 or something like that, and then the 4700, I think, takes a shortened version of it. Key switches require these funny little bunny ear situations, whatever you want to call that. Cam disc. What is a cam disc? Well, a cam disc is actually, I can show you what that is again by looking at our picture. You won't notice it very much. However, you can see that pin I referred to earlier. Well, what you're looking at in this entire area is clear and clean through. You could take a probe and stick it through here and go all the way to the back of the lock and potentially manipulate the lock. That's what the cam plug is for, to block that type of manipulation. You always want to have that installed, that cam disc. And that indeed what that is going to give you there. Well, you know, you still have to have room for the key to come through, but it is meant to help dissuade that sort of attack to a certain extent. And it will block part of the key from coming through. Or a probe. Now, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page, and here it is. And suffice it to say, you can order this cylinder, the scalp plate, in every finish that would match the rest of your hardware. The brasses, the bronze, the chromes, the nickels, the satin, the polished, the powder coated, the oil rubbed. So keep in mind that scalp plate can be done in lots of finishes. But that link to the manufacturer's page below this video will allow you to review not only all of the Yale items that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. That's several hundred pages worth of everything Yale, a company that's been in business for 170 years, 850 pages. Speaking of 170 years, that catalog is there, but so are prior versions of the catalog, and namely, positively old versions of the catalog. 1880, 1889, 1917. I was able to use the 1937 Yale catalog to great effect when I was looking for an answer on a locksmithing test as it pertained to locks that are really 17th and 18th century technology, but they are still made. They're called lever tumbler locks, and they're used exclusively in, well, not exclusively, but they're used primarily in bank safe vault applications when you do need higher security. They're also made in very low security applications like a drawer lock or a trunk lock, things of that nature. But, you know, if you wanted to take a trip down memory lane, well, I don't know that it would be memory lane, but if you wanted to take a time machine hop back 80 years ago, here's what Yale was making before World War II. Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Yale, Linus Yale Jr. Is the person who patented the pin tumbler construction of cylinder, which we all know and use today, which this cylinder is. They're pin tumblers. The idea wasn't his originally, but he took a 4,000-year-old Egyptian idea and concept and brought it into modern use, pre-Civil War use, and it has maintained and established and maintained a primary position in terms of cylinder technology. And really, in my estimation, with the exception of some very unusual cylinders like an ASA cylinder, an Abloy cylinder, or a Abloy is a Norwegian company, a Scandinavian company, I should say, very unusual construction, Abloy. Fichet is also very unusual. That's a French cylinder construction. almost all are based on the pin tumbler concept with just derivative evolutions and steps and variations of that. Medico is a derivative of the pin tumbler. It's a pin tumbler. It's just a highly secure derivative of the pin tumbler technology. So fascinating information. Let's actually, one more thing. The Bicentric Yale cylinder is here. Bicentric is a cylinder that was done by Yale that has 2 plugs in it, and the reason by which is a fascinating one, but it will allow you to have, obviously, 2 different keys operate this, but allow you to isolate your TMK or top master key from your biddings that are here. That's a fantastic rabbit hole to go down into. All right, let's wrap up this video on camera. If you have any questions on the Yale, this is their part number 2123. Please feel free to reach out to us. Be mindful, this has a factory lead time. This took every bit of 3 weeks to come into us. So do plan ahead. Now, there's a way for us to accommodate certain requests for longer cylinders far faster, but there will be limitations in terms of the keyways that are available very quickly, the ultimate length that could be achieved. If you needed a 2.5-inch mortise cylinder and you didn't care about the finish or the keyway, we could put that together pretty quickly. Even 3-inch, things of that nature can be done fairly quickly. But again, it would not be employing anything from Yale. So plan ahead. If you know that you've got an unusual thickness, plan ahead. We will very often to woodworking companies, in fact, who get involved in projects that have a vast quantity of custom millwork, trim, panels, even doors and frames, and therefore the hardware, where they're ending up with very unusual door thicknesses, where they're adding to one side of the door only, as I had described earlier, and those locks become relatively, the description of the lock becomes a very short paragraph, because you have to say, 1 3/4 door thickness with a 1-inch applied panel to the secured side of the door, the hand, which means I need a longer cylinder, I need a longer spindle, but the strike plate is a standard strike plate. Everything on the inside is standard, but I'm going to need longer posts or longer screws to screw it all together, versus on the secure side, which would be the pull side of the door. That's where it's going to be applied. Then you need, longer screws, a longer spindle on that side, and an extended lip strike. So you have to clarify all that. And when you're dealing with that, especially with Yale, their system of determining how the factory is to manufacture this lock is based on a special application request. And that takes time, because the way by which Yale forces that information to flow through their company has to go from this person to this person back to this person. And that code needs to accompany the order when it goes in. Otherwise, the people in the back don't know what to make. They need the code, I suppose, in the computer, that kind of thing. Anyway, the point is, if you have unusual lengths, thicknesses, anything odd, plan ahead. Whether it be Yale or any other company, plan ahead. Any questions on the 2123 and a 630 finish or any other Yale product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.